Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Disability Podcast with your hosts Eddie and Damo. On this episode of the podcast, we have the pleasure of interviewing Justine Hall from Plan Tracker. We cover a lot of ground in this podcast, including understanding your NDIS plan, what the funding is for, how to make the most of your plan, right through to invoicing, service agreements, and we also discuss some of the potential changes that could be coming to the NDIS in 2024. So without further ado, thanks for tuning into the podcast, and we hope you enjoy.
Is to regain their health and fitness.
Yeah, and that's why we would have put it through in the first place.
Like, the goal is right there. So whether
plan.
or not gym gear is an everyday expense or not, if it's a major goal, then that should be okay.
Yeah, absolutely, but we're still being asked.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we get asked, in that situation, we get asked from LACs and planners for a please explain. And then there's something called a quarterly, I don't know the actual name. It's called a quarterly check from, I think it's the claims and payments team of the NDIS, where they will just select a batch of payment reference numbers and get you to evidence each of those payments reference numbers that you submitted or became automated once you put your claim up.
So a bit like an audit, they'll just
definitely an
grab
audit.
some.
Yeah. So, but it's just random. And then there's one where it's concentrated, so that they will look at weekend support, or they will look at a particular type of inconsistency with a client, an NDIS participant, where they have overspent on a line item that the plan wasn't originally built for. And so they will then ask us for that, please explain as well. And in most situations, it's similar to what we were talking about earlier. The needs are changed. And I can think of one situation where somebody rang me directly and said that the NDIS had contacted them because their participant had used weekend supports and the plan wasn't built for weekend supports. And she said that the participant had just left hospital and needed those weekend supports. And I was just like, yeah, that's cool. Like, that's what the NDIS funding, the flexibility of the core budget is there for. But more and more, we're seeing questions being raised because it's not the way it's built, that the NDIS are then also looking at what's being used and forgetting about the whole choice and control and forgetting about the fact that from day to day things change in someone's life. So as long as the plan manager can go back with a very robust and thorough explanation as to why those supports were claimed in the first place, I don't know if it's still being pursued to back last year when the NDIS was docking payments back down to plan managers because retrospectively they decided that an invoice was not reasonable or necessary. I don't think that money withholding those funds is still going, but it absolutely did happen last year.
Is this like changes that we're saying? Do you think part of this is the NDIS's way of trying to address potential fraud that's occurring? And they've also brought in a new Salesforce and something called Pace, which I'm yet to fully understand. With which rabbit hole we're going down today. But is all of this like, because I know unfortunately, if we even backtracking further, Anne-Marie, the sad case of neglect, from that and the inquiry, I understand that there was something put into the system on the NDIS's end that if somebody has only one support provider, an alarm goes off. So is this like a further step towards the NDIS trying to like put in little things in place to sort of checks and balances to screen things?
Yeah, I think it's definitely to try and monitor potential fraud, but probably also to just do that double check on what they believe is reasonable and necessary, because maybe down the track the plan might be reduced and then the scheme sustainability could also then be impacted. I think it comes back to potential fraud, but more sustainability questions.
Sustainability, which is a huge thing. Like they're saying now the NDIS is, much more expensive than what we have as the gap. I forget the name, the gap that we pay for like pharmaceutical expenses. What's that? Medicare.
The rebate. NDIS no, not the rebate. Yeah, whatever that is. Yeah.
So it's it's just gone much more than everyone expected, right?
And and we'll continue to do so. Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that in the last week or so, since the NDIS review has put out its interim report, and then organisations have taken the opportunity to respond to that report, there's been a lot more dialogue around the NDIS and where the challenges are, and the fact that a lot of people are calling out the original way that it's been built. So it's even the DSC had an article just this morning that's an interesting read that reflects on another article written by a guy called Mark Brown from the Summer Foundation, and there's a lot of warning bells being rung in reasonably high places, and have been so for a while. But I just feel like the dialogue is beginning to gain a lot more momentum, and the next couple of months, especially because all of this is coinciding with the PACE rollout, potentially, if PACE does roll out on the 30th of October, like they're saying, it's going to be a very interesting sector that we're all committed to love working in.
Should participants be scared?
No, I don't think because we signed the convention. We signed the convention, so I don't think participants should be scared at all. I think that the NDIS needs a bit of a brand shake-up itself. I feel like some conversations and some people's opinion about recipients of NDIS funds, even in the article this morning, it's almost setting up an us and them situation where, and it was mentioned this morning, where some people feel like they're actually unfairly privileged out of the NDIS, which is a pretty of a controversial statement to make because of the amount of funding and support that some NDIS participants receive.
Like somebody being like, oh, well, me as Gen Pop, I pay a gap for psychology fees, or I pay a gap for a GP referral for physio, and this person gets it all at home. So there's
and this person actually can choose to have the NDIS fund. And that's the thing, is that, you could, especially with psychology and with services that you can be accessed under private health or the Medicare system, there's always a little bit of an outlay, out-of-pocket cost there. But a plan managed participant can get it all through their NDIS plan, where potentially maybe they should be leaning on other systems. But then again, I would never advocate for someone to be out of pocket if they didn't need to be out of pocket, because a lot of people are financially disadvantaged anyway. So if there's a way to have the entire appointment, and those appointments they're phenomenally expensive, that's what... And I guess that's what you are as a citizen, I would be, absolutely, do it.
Big welcome, Justine.
Oh, thanks.
we are totally rolling already and just down a deep rabbit hole of fun knowledge.
And we completely skipped our intro.
Hi.
But Eddie, it was just too good not to hit record on.
Eddie, welcome to the podcast.
Welcome to the podcast, Damo. How are you?
Good, and today our guest is Justine Hall.
From Plan Tracker, well known about the space for helping anyone and everyone with anything NDIS related. I still remember when I changed jobs and was trying to get on LinkedIn to connect with people. You were one of the first people who took the time to catch up with me for coffee and just encourage me with what I was doing. So a real testament to your genuineness to help anyone. So
see, that's what NDIS is really about, coffee catch-ups.
Well, it's about coffee
as LinkedIn would attest to,
yes.
But it's about the authenticity to work together, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
No matter what we're doing, because we know we're dealing with people who really need it.
And, from what I've found, like, whether I ran my business or just this with Eddie, you make some pretty genuine friends too.
Absolutely.
Like, actual, not, you're not trying to steal each other's clients away from each other. We're all working together for the better cause.
Yeah.
And... you make some genuine friends out of it.
Yep, absolutely. The longer that you're in the game, so to speak, absolutely.
Eddie doesn't know it yet, but he's stuck with me for
it's good. I love it, mate. It's been great fun so far, the banter. Keep it up.
He's going to call his next child Damo.
Look, it's definitely not off the tables. You're a top bloke, mate. You're a top bloke.
Thank you.
Damo the second.
Yes. Or just call him DJ.
DJ. Nice. Welcome, Justine.
Thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, there's a lot of changes going on in the world of plan management, I think, into the future, and a lot of changes in the NDIS. And like you said, Damien, people could be a little bit concerned about what the future looks like.
Well, as a participant, I'm a little bit edgy about it. And I think it's more because, as a participant, I don't know what they're even looking at or what they're... trying to change, or are they going to make it even harder for us?
Yeah.
Are they going to make it even harder to get reports actually across the line to be accepted as a genuine okay, well, this guy really does need 15 hours a day of support,
Yeah.
even though us behind the telephone have no idea who he is and he only gets 8 hours a day.
That's the challenge, isn't it? When somebody who's trying to make those judgments and decisions based on somebody that they've never met, and then you've got your allied health therapists who have got really long-standing trusted relationships, who understand the needs of the person with disability. But then that little tiny niggle that person will try and get you the very best, which might actually mean that they are potentially suggesting that somebody might need more therapy than they do. I know that there's a couple of speech
It
pathologists.
definitely happens.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. It's almost like you ask for the lot and see what you get, but it shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't be like that. So, yeah.
What do you think the future holds of plan management? A question I have in particular is around, we offer some, give myself a pat on the back. We offer some half decent allied health services at Flex, but one thing in particular is, we offer physiotherapy, just as an example. Some people come to us with psychosocial disabilities, and it's incredibly clear to us very early on that if intervention of physical activity isn't in place, these people are at really high risk of developing secondary diagnosis and being hospitalised, or both. Big expense to the taxpayer. But if regular exercise is implemented, the chances of that really reduced.
Yeah.
We send through invoices all the time for physio, and they get approved. Do you think the NDIS will look at changing those sorts of things and pushing back?
I think it's a really tough one because, like you say, hospital prevention and being able to, even using exercise physio or physio to help people to get into the workforce, it's known that those two supports are amazing supports to help someone either re-enter or enter the workforce for the first time. It's almost like you need to think quite broadly as to how that support can be used. And I remember when I first started in plan management over 6 years ago, I went out and saw a participant of the NDIS, and the LAC was there as well. And I said to the participant who was struggling to get out of the house, did have a mental health challenge, and that was one of the reasons why he was struggling to get out of the house. And he was complaining about some of the pieces of his body that would stop him from going out of the house. Anyway, the point is that I said, well, you could probably access some physiotherapy. And the LAC, now this is 6-ish years ago, the LAC turned around knowing that this was a client with a mental health challenge, and she said, that is not reasonable and necessary. That participant does not require physiotherapy. And really what they were looking for back then was hardly any therapy at all, and an occupational therapist to come in, do the functional capacity assessment so that the NDIS could have some data on this person, so then they could track how that person progressed over, the next or however many years. So that was a bit of a learning lesson for me, when to say something and when to shut up, but then also still very quietly perhaps ring the participants after I've had a conversation with them going, just so you know, you can actually get physio. Your budget is plan managed. You have choice and control how to use that budget. Now, one of the things that the NDIS is doing is tightening up on some people's plans. I couldn't tell you the number. It's just that I've seen a couple in the last couple of weeks where, even though the plan is plan managed, every single cent of that plan is called what's called a stated support. So the NDIS have said, you've got this many hours for this particular line item, and the whole plan is built that way, so there is no flexibility. You can still choose your provider because it's plan managed, but you cannot choose how to use your plan, and I think that's concerning.
Well, then
Can
what
you
happens?
unpack that a little bit?
Yep.
I was just going to say, what happens in that situation? Let's say that was myself, and then all of a sudden next week I catch COVID, and I need to isolate away from my wife and children that do provide a little bit of my support, and then all of a sudden I need a support worker with me for 24 hours a day for the next 5 days.
Yep.
What happens then?
Then you will absolutely go through all of whatever that support is, the weekday
And that's my
support,
point.
weeknight support.
And then
yep.
again, my plan will run out in 9 months instead of 12
Yeah,
months.
and you'll probably be left with a lot of other buckets of money that you haven't been able to access.
Because I was sick or whatever, and then, I can't touch it,
And you got to potentially justify how disabled you are,
Yes,
right?
yep.
To the NDIS.
Which I've done countless times.
It's just like a record. You wish you could just hit play on the record
Yeah.
instead of repeating yourself,
One
right?
day I'll just record my whole scenario
Yeah.
and just When they ring me, I'll just press play.
Yeah, right. It must feel like that.
Yeah.
So what does that look like to unpack that? So you're saying like everything down to like what they're cleaning and
absolutely.
Care supports are right through to like what they must use their allied health capacity building services on.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's a really long and it looks like a horrible document, but all plans are built on this series of line items, like 400 line items. I don't know. I just made that up.
It's an exciting document.
It's a very exciting document. And so what the NDIS has done in a couple of the plans that I've seen recently, and these are hundreds of $1,000 plans, is that they've made say, for example, your core supports is $160,000 in total, right? But what they've done, they've said you've got $18,000 for weekday support, you've got $30,000 for night support, you've got $8,000 for Saturdays, you've got $6,000 for Sundays, you've got $500 for public holidays. You'd have more than that for public holidays. You've got this much for consumables. They've literally made every single dollar of that $160,000, it must be processed under one of the line items that they've deemed that person needs. And so the situation that I came across last week is that the participant had $40,000 or $50,000 in their weekday supports, day or night, but they were using the supports on the weekend and they only had $8,000 or $9,000 on the Saturday and Sunday, which means they ran out of their Saturday and Sunday funding, but they still had $50,000 that they could have spent in their core if it wasn't what's called stated. If it was just a regular core budget, it said $190,000, you can spend that $190,000 as you need. There wouldn't have been a problem. But as a plan manager, you have to process under the stated line. That's the service booking that we've had to draw down, which will change in October. So all of this could just actually be irrelevant in a month or so. But who knows?
Yeah.
I know, it's baffling. It's baffling that you've given a participant choice and control, but you've actually reduced or removed a good portion of that choice and control by how the plan's been built.
Particularly when you look at NDIS having, for those who don't know, 3 different types of billing: NDIA, plan managed and self-managed. You go from self-managed, incredibly flexible, so it's plan managed, and then to go to something like that, that's so rigid, and you're dealing with so many different diagnoses. Where, why, and for how long is this going to be going for?
I know.
So
when PACE rolls out, they are going to be, they keep saying that service bookings will be removed. There aren't going to be any more service bookings. But from my understanding and memory, they will, if they think that something must be spent in a particular way, probably like plan management fees, that doesn't sort of become a free floating fee. That will still be stated. So it may be that there's no service bookings, but I think stated line items will still remain. It's a little bit probably going a little bit too far, but it's there's a lot of question marks, I think, about what happens when this new system rolls out, and then partnering that is the new planning. The way that plans are actually being planned and built and delivered. Wow. It's going to be very interesting. So, bring your popcorn times.
I ask you again, should participants be scared?
Yeah.
I think that there's a huge education.
Right now you're making me pucker up just a little bit.
Well, it's just so much for people, isn't it?
It's hard enough to navigate as it is.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people so much worse off than myself that can't advocate and can't get their head around all these dots and dashes and dollar signs.
Yeah.
Like,
I
don't know. It is scary.
It's scary because not everybody has a support coordinator. We know that only 44 or 46% of people with NDIS plans have support coordination funded. And some of the things that are happening, from my understanding, when PACE rolls out, one of the things that baffles me is that what is
PACE?
PACE is the new. It's the new way that there was. First of all, there's a couple of different things. It's the new CRM that the NDIS is using. So they're moving away from their software that was called SAP, I think, moving into Salesforce.
Yes.
And along with that, the whole way of claims and payments is also changing, and that could just be because down the track we're going to have point of sale payments, which is probably something that will impact plan management.
Guide.
Well, I think there will still be price caps.
Yep.
Does that mean I would, when you say like a tap and go, or I would pay my workers that way, or like?
I guess only if they're holding a little high caps machine when they come to you. Yeah.
So
but it'll be more likely the allied health that will help.
So I would, if I saw Eddie, I'd tap and pay.
Tap and pay.
Okay. I'd enjoy that.
Yeah, well, it makes it's sort of, it's probably not the right word to use, but it normalises an experience of going to a therapy appointment. Yeah.
And paying a gap fee or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's happening it's supposed to be towards the end of October that PACE is rolling out. But one thing that participants need to do, and I know that this is because it's another way that choice and control is being demonstrated, but what participants need to do with a new plan or a renewal, so when they've already an existing participant, they get a new plan, or they're a new participant in the first place, they have to go onto the portal. Now, I don't know very many participants who actually use the NDIS's portal. They have to go onto the portal and they have to nominate their plan manager. And they need to know who their plan manager is to begin with. They need to have made that decision and then gone on and they have to physically nominate their plan manager. And then when they get another plan after 2 or 3 years, or whenever it is that they get a new plan, they have a reassessment, they have to go back in and re-nominate. If they don't want to move, that's fine. People can move plan managers whenever they want. But you have to, it's that one task that, I know for me, I don't even like opening my gas or electricity bill or anything like that. It's that sort of thing. Like I feel like there's going to be a lot of concern or a feeling like I feel like a lot of people are not going to want to do that.
And a lot of people don't know, just like the Centrelink website, a lot of people don't know how to navigate it.
Yeah. 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 So that's one little thing that's coming up. Another little thing that's coming up, and it doesn't really apply to South Australians because we don't have that many agency-managed plans in South Australia. But if you have an agency-managed participant who only has the provider will ask the NDIS directly for the funds rather than going through a plan manager, and normally they get paid overnight if you put up your payment request. What's going to happen now is that you, as a provider, you need to get the participant to make you an endorsed provider. Can you imagine all this communication with the NDIS? And then if you're not an endorsed provider, my belief is that it could take a provider up to 10 days to be paid from the NDIS because you haven't been able to have that conversation. And I'm just thinking about let's think of issues like homelessness and someone trying to get out of hospital or mental health challenge or even just access to technology, wanting to make a phone call. There's so many people that call through to us and it's taken them so much to even get to the phone to make a phone call that there's going to be so much more demand, well, definitely demand, but requirement for people to be communicating with the NDIS than they have had to before, which I think will be quite a barrier.
There's also going to be a lot of providers screaming for their money because they're already a week and a half late.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're about to have your next service. So,
and there's a lot of providers that, they're it's a weekly turnaround of paying of their staff. So there's going to be some cash flow issues as well that need to be managed and navigated. But there's just so much coming and there's still so much unknown. The NDIS have done a lot of virtual meetings and they've had a couple of face-to-face meetings to try and explain, but I feel like it's probably people are asking more questions than they have the answers to, which is, being in September now, it's reasonably concerning seeing as it's supposed to be rolling out at the end of October. So there's going to have to be a huge education. As a participant, should you be scared? I think there needs to be a lot more education and a lot more advocates.
And what role do providers, like Eddy at Flex, have to do in regards to explaining these new rules to their clients that Eddy needs to be put down as a
endorsed provider.
Thank you, endorsed provider. Is it up to them to tell their clients?
I think it's up to everybody, but absolutely, the provider's probably the first port of call. And that's the thing, is that it's actually going to take the provider's time, and even if they sit with the participant to make the phone call or to make that link in between them and the NDIS, who's being paid for that is, some providers are going to do that out of the kindness of their heart because they want to be paid.
So there's going to potentially be a bit of a backlog of life admin for NDIS participants with these changes coming
I
about.
think so.
It might all sound daunting and overwhelming, or for some of us exciting from a nerd perspective of what the changes could look like, but really at the end of the day for participants it could just be a bit of extra work to keep services going. Is that potentially what we
I
could be
think so.
saying?
I think that as long as if they're plan managed, it's in the plan manager's best interest to make sure that at all points they keep communicating with an NDIS participant and try and make it easy. And I don't know how far down the track we are at Plan Tracker as to even being able to, because we're so tech driven. I honestly don't know whether we have got plans for our own portal for there to be like a little gateway to make it a little less intimidating and be able to action those things through our own portal that we've built, that you don't even know that you've actually gone into your own NDIS portal. Try and make it more, I think there might be a bit of innovation coming out of it, to be honest with you, to try and make things more simple. But, and yeah, as a nerd, it's going to be very interesting to see how it is executed. But it's just a bit daunting because, as per usual, I think the NDIS sort of forgets the importance of a plan manager and a support coordinator. And doesn't understand the impacts of some of the initiatives that they want to
some of
trigger.
the unseen that they do.
Yeah. So, yeah, especially if you don't endorse your plan manager and all your providers are sending in their invoices and the plan manager doesn't even know that they've dropped off. But again, it comes back to communication. And, there's 1,400 plan managers in Australia. I'm not sure that every one of them is going to be ready.
True. That's a massive point. Hey, a lot of providers for the future of what the NDIS is, I think.
That's a lot of plan managers.
It's a lot of plan managers.
I've only been with 2. I need to start shopping.
I know, and I think one of yours has actually just been acquired. So
Yeah, they have.
yeah, yes.
Yeah.
What's been your biggest take for sticking with your plan manager, Damo? And what's a good plan manager do for you?
Ultimately, it's the turnover rate of invoices and being paid.
Is being able to contact a familiar person a big factor?
Always knowing, if I ring up and say, yeah, hey, is Jack there? And I always get Jack.
Yeah. He knows you.
Yep.
You've been able to talk stuff through.
Yep.
Those are 2 things you really value for your plan.
And knowing that if my providers put an invoice in on Monday, it's generally paid by Wednesday, Thursday.
Yeah. Point of
Because they rely on those incomes, obviously, because it's their job.
Yeah.
But when it starts reaching a week and a half, and you've had no feedback or anything whatsoever, that's when it becomes a problem. Because they need to pay their bills, they need to live their life as much as I do. And for me, that's the number one takeaway.
Do you also get notified when an invoice goes through?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd be surprised if people didn't, or some people might not have the capacity to comprehend that either, but I would be wanting to know how much people would, if somebody came for 3 hours of support, I wouldn't mind checking if it was actually put down for 3 hours.
For me, as a bit of a tech nerd, it comes down to applications on your phone.
Cool.
And if I've got a pretty good app and, communication, app and turnover of invoices, that's my 3. Because I can jump on my app. It's called CareView Advantage, I think it is. I can jump on there anytime and I can approve or decline any invoices I want.
Not bad.
Yeah, so it helps having that flexibility.
What are your thoughts on, and this is me hearing about for some plan managers using an AI generated processor for like some invoices?
Yeah. Look, I think that anything
and that's
that
something participants might not even be aware of, that plan managers are using software to just process some invoices.
Yeah.
Is that right? Am I saying that correct?
I think that anything that will allow same day, next day payments, as long as privacy, as long as the safeguards are in place and privacy is ensured, I don't actually see a problem with that. I think that in the past, some plan managers have offshored a lot of their processing, which is more of a problem. But I know that we, at the moment, and whether this changes, but we have an invoice reader, so you might as well say that that's some sort of automated. Well, it is an automated process. So when we receive an invoice, the invoice reader will strip down what it can recognise as being fields that it needs, and then one of our team will go in and fill in the gaps. But that actually holds up the processing until one of the team members can actually jump on. I don't see a problem with it as long as people have still got the right, not right, they always have a right, the ability to be able to look over their invoice, make sure that those services were delivered. But yeah, anything to try and speed up that payment back to the provider or the reimbursement, I say go for it.
Can take out some of the human error and just allow human to interaction to sort of check things over, right?
Yeah.
And, as I was saying, I've only been with 2 plan managers in the entire time that NDIS has been around. And
you'd be an unusual...
I was one of the first in the northern suburbs to get the NDIS.
Yeah.
So, that was pretty cool. And at the time, there was only a handful of plan managers. So your choices were limited. And, of course, you went with the one that had the big, shiny, bright lights and good advertising skills. And they were fine at the beginning.
Yeah.
But they grew way too quick. And then all of a sudden their invoice turnover went from 3 days to 7 days. And I don't want to have to hear my support workers whinge to me every day because, they haven't been paid yet. It's like, well, I can't hurry it up.
Yeah, hey, Damien, barely had enough petrol to get here to do my next shift with you.
Yeah, I might not be able to get here tonight,
Like I do, to be honest, and I'm going to probably say something that's not going to make me popular.
I'll just say that's why we're here.
As an ordinary pay-as-you-go employee, I get paid fortnightly. Now, some people get paid weekly. So I feel like there needs to be a measure of, not reasonableness, because that word gets thrown up too much, but what's to stop someone from putting their invoice in at the end of the week and be paid a couple of days later, like a lot of employees are paid? I feel like there's a little bit of entitlement. Sometimes I feel like there's a little bit of entitlement.
There's a big entitlement.
Yeah.
And, my support workers, for some reason, they put their invoices in on a Monday. Mm-hmm. So then they're generally not getting paid till Wednesday or Thursday.
Yeah.
But the problem is then if the plan manager, as you know, things can happen.
Yeah.
You can have system crashes. Suddenly it's Friday.
Hey everyone, just a quick interruption from today's podcast to share with you about today's sponsor, FlexCare. FlexCare is an SA-owned and operated allied health service provider offering in-home services across Metro Adelaide and from our Norwood clinic. They offer occupational therapy, physiotherapy, podiatry, exercise physiology, and therapy assistance. If you're in need of therapy to achieve an NDIS goal, get in touch with them today. FlexCare is an NDIS registered service provider. Now back to the podcast.
And they haven't received their remittance slip
Then
yet.
it's a problem.
You're like, crap, I'm not getting paid till Monday at the earliest.
Yeah. Yeah.
It happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And it shouldn't. So that's when, automated processes could probably circumvent some of those problems. But again, it could also be a service booking. Let's get rid of those service bookings, see what happens, see if that actually
And then,
helps.
and, now, you've got some plan managers that are being brought out by big insurance companies.
Yeah, and then you think it's choice and control, but you're just going from Video Easy to Blockbuster, for example, and they're both owned by the same company, right?
Yeah, but Blockbuster was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was.
I did both.
I'm showing my age. When I was your age, Blockbuster was it.
That was your go-to, Blockbuster and Video Easy?
No, actually, Movieland.
Oh, yeah, the world of entertainment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Will entertain you.
That's right.
Yes,
Love it. You're an 80s kid, aren't you? Yeah.
I am. Yes, I am. I had one 5 minutes from my house when I was a kid, so
Get over the VHS.
I knew their catchphrase quite well.
So good. So good.
So yeah, I'm not sold on that idea
Of the acquisitions.
of plan manager companies being brought by insurance companies because, yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to take away a lot of that. Like I said, if I ring and I want to speak to someone, I just say, hey, is Justine there? And I get Justine. But when they start getting brought out by these huge companies that are nationwide, probably with a overseas telephone call service, what happens then?
It's interesting, isn't
Does
it?
it create a monopoly?
Well, and that's the thing. I know
I
that
think it does. It's almost enough to steer me away.
you look at, not that the NDIS quarterly report, they used to put in the top 10 plan managers in Australia, and they didn't have it in this last quarterly report, but it might be that, a good portion of those top 10 are actually all owned by the same organisation, which is NIB. It's NIB. Allianz is also in the game, but we haven't heard of Allianz actually purchasing any plan management organisations, but NIB now owns about
Allianz
7.
have one.
Allianz are now... No. Let's talk about something else. No, they definitely entered the market.
Yes.
But I work for Plan Tracker Plan Management, so I just...
But anyway. Yes.
Anyway.
Moving right along.
Moving right along.
Here's a funny one though, right? I know we could get on many rabbit holes, but this funniest, almost quirky invoices you've seen processed, and then how that has changed over time.
Yeah, so how many sex toy invoices have you had?
Oh, well, we haven't had, not that I'm aware of, we haven't had sex toy invoices, but we've definitely had bar fridges, Ugg boots.
And have they been approved?
No. But the thing is that...
People have a
Hang
crack.
on. Wouldn't Ugg boots be? Couldn't they be if the person had bad blood flow circulation?
What if they needed orthotics for their
See,
own
now
legs?
Look. The thing is that I know this person and this person would not necessarily, from conversations, have poor blood circulation to their feet. But the thing is that what we would do is we would say, look, we won't be able to put this invoice through, and these are the reasons why, and help try and build capacity as to their decision-making processes.
Or you could go to Kmart and buy a pair for $8.99.
Or you could do that. We did have another one that was 9 pairs of the same shoe but different sizes, which, that you can't even bat back at me about that one, Damien. That's just entrepreneurial, that one.
Are they growing weekly?
Yes, that must be what it is. Look, it's
just picture the whole family at the shop all wearing Nike
shoes.
Air Jordans.
Yeah. We really encourage people to spend we really do spend their plan and acknowledging that they are the experts in their life, and we're not going to ask for an occupational report or full assessment and report for a walking stick, or which has happened. Other plan managers, we know that other plan managers have asked for a report because they think they've made the business decision that a walking stick was a fashion accessory, and we were just like, well, we're not going to ask you for we're not going to even ask you for a letter for those sort of things. But what we will do, especially when it comes to devices and things like that, is that at Plan Tracker we will make sure that everyone is protected just by sort of from our experience, knowing what comes into question and just trying to protect that claim as much as we can. So then when we do get those inquiries from the claims and payments team, why did you put this through? Then we've got what we call our My Choice tool, which is the 7 guiding questions that is in the self-management booklet. If it's a device, we will ask for a letter of recommendation from our occupational therapist, and the invoice. So we'll ask for those 3 things for something like a device, but certainly not for a walking stick, not for something that's super, super low cost like an air filter or something like that, it's as long as they say this is for a disability related reason, we will put those things through, and then not stop that process, like delay that process any more than it needs to be delayed.
So they can have whatever they want, they just can't have Ugg boots.
Correct.
Is that Plan Tracker's new slogan?
Yeah.
Anything but Ugg boots.
Anything but Uggies.
ABU.
A question I've got with the uncertainty. A question I've got with the uncertainty of what the NDIS looks like, and there's going to be changes ahead. Where should people be looking, and who should they be speaking to look at advice for the future, whether a support coordinator, participant, just trying to figure out where to from here. DSC, I've always found them pretty helpful.
Yeah.
Speak with their plan manager maybe, I don't know.
Absolutely. I think the plan managers, it's in their best interest to know exactly what's going on, because they're going to have to switch over to some different way pretty soon and have different conversations. Yep, absolutely. Support coordinator, plan manager, someone like the DSC, even Sam Payer in the growing space, she's always got good resources. Cassie Day is always doing things as well and trying to increase awareness around...
Cassie, who's that?
Cassie Day?
Oh,
Cassie Day. You've never met her?
No, I haven't heard of her.
Never heard of her.
No.
She owns the Carers Place.
Oh, does she?
Yeah, she does.
She sounds lovely.
She is really lovely.
Awesome.
Summer Foundation also have excellent...
Damien went to school with Cassie.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Glad we clarified that.
We're actually interviewing her in a couple of weeks. So
Excellent.
I'm just getting in while I can.
Yeah.
Before Eddie gets all the goss from her.
Definitely the Summer Foundation, definitely people with disability. There's some really good websites. There's a couple of really good Western Australian websites. Some of the things that they say are quite Western Australian centric, but they seem to be really ahead of the game with some of the information and support that they have. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how. I'm more than happy to send through some links of websites that I know that have been really supportive, and you can chuck it at the bottom of the podcasty thing. That'd be awesome. This podcasty thing that we're doing. But yeah, LACs I think are just definitely a port of call as well. Except I think that they are probably training pretty hard in pace right now.
Yeah. I've met some LACs that are just absolutely fantastic.
Yep.
And there's one in particular that I've wanted to get as my LAC for the last 2 years, but the NDIS won't let me because I'm a complex plan. They won't let me go get a LAC. I'm like, but I'd love to have someone that I can just ring and ask for by name.
Yeah.
You know, but they won't let me do it. It's weird.
Yeah, that is weird.
Yeah.
Look, and I think that the whole LAC role is changing as well, and so there will be, you know how there's some LACs where you are directed to the concierge, the front counter, like you don't really get in contact with your LAC very often, but that's actually changing. So LACs are going to have a lot more ownership of their own caseloads. If they, some do already, we know that, but there will be a my LAC contact for apart from complex participants. But I might just lay off them for a little while until it's all sort of embedded and they're dealing with the changes that are coming their way.
But hopefully some good communication trickling through for the participant, right?
Yeah.
And I think some of the best LACs are the ones that, you know, they have lived experience themselves. Like anybody in this industry, the more lived experience you have, the better you are at your job and the more understanding you have of your client base.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Anything else, team? Damo?
I don't know.
Any Kelly questions?
What's in your future?
Oh, wow. Look, I've sort of fell into plan management. I really didn't know that I would love it as much as it turns out that I had. But it's a sort of job. We keep bringing on a new team, and every time I say hello to the new team members, I say it's the only job where on a Monday morning I'm super happy to go to work. I really like getting up and going to work, and I couldn't say that about the various other jobs that I've had, careers that I've had in my life. So, look, something definitely still with Plan Tracker, or as we were talking about before, we actually owned by Macmillan Shakespeare, which also owns Plan Partners. So it's a reasonably uncertain road for all plan managers as to what our end role is going to look like. There might be a lot more efficiencies with account processing, so it might be more of a customer service role. I don't know whether plan managers, seeing as we're already being called into account with this whole audit activity, whether the NDIS will turn us all into awful auditors. I don't know. I honestly don't know that. I would not be interested in doing anything like that. I don't know. I just know that I love doing what I'm doing. I love having the type of diverse conversations that I get to have. I was talking to a participant on Friday that has been supported by Plan Tracker for a number of years, and I know him well enough to know that, you know, he lives with his mum and they've got some great fruit trees out the back, and then he told me that he has cancer, and I was just like, it hurt my heart to know that but I also feel really privileged that
he shared that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I guess at the same time hurt you because you know he's already dealing with enough.
Correct.
Then, you know, the gods throw all that on as well.
Correct. Absolutely.
A bit shit sometimes.
It is a bit shit sometimes. Yeah. So yeah, I love having those sort of conversations because it reminds me of why I'm doing what I'm doing. I love going out and volunteering. The other week I went out and volunteered out at John McVitie Centre for an Activate Sports Day, and it was all children with disability who were getting around and practicing different sports, and just the joy on their faces was just incredible. So I get to have those sort of experiences. I get to have those sort of conversations. I also get to talk to councils about accessibility and inclusion plans. I think my job's really cool, and that's probably why I would prefer that it didn't change, but if it did, you know, I guess I'll just have to deal with it. But yeah, really love where I am, what I do, and who I work with and work for.
Yeah, been such a privilege knowing you, working with you, and I can see you care for, you know, the community. It's awesome. You know, you've been a wealth of knowledge for us all. Question I had, my last one, don't know if you've got any more, Damo, but just around participants, if they've ever got any concerns around potential fraud, this is the little angry Eddie in me that gets frustrated at our vulnerable and precious people in our community being taken advantage of. Any tips and tricks you've got for any participants who don't know what to do, or they're a little bit unsure about what's being processed and what's going on? What's this service agreement all about?
Yeah,
what should they be doing?
Service agreements, plan tracker and plan managers love service agreements because it offers a level of safety or safeguarding for not just the participant but for the provider as well. In the past, it's happened, and it still probably happens, that providers will provide services and not realise that the participant's running out of funding, and then they're eventually out of pocket, and that's happened over and over again. But plan managers should be able to quarantine service agreements, which are still, you can still edit them if you need to and make changes to them if you need to. But that service agreement conversation is really... It's a tough one because we don't necessarily have those sort of service agreement conversations, but sometimes they can just be so detailed and so overwhelming, and some service providers might tuck in there that they're going to charge this much for non-face-to-face time and things that, unless you work in plan management, to be honest, you probably wouldn't understand. So that's where you could definitely ring the plan manager and have a chat about the service agreement and ask, what is this non-face-to-face time? What does that actually mean?
Is this reasonable? Is this right?
Yeah, exactly. And to be honest, service providers can charge that, but they need to charge it appropriately. And then also there should be a way that you can either view and then put on hold invoices if you need to, or you should be able to withhold payment until you've gone in and actually approved that invoice. Now, that's not great for a provider because it could actually mean delays down the track, but there should be that level of choice as to how your invoices are processed. So all plan managers should offer an app or access to a dashboard in the most accessible format for the participant. They should definitely make sure that support coordinators can see everything that's everything that's plan managed, because we can't see anything that's agency managed anyway. But there needs to be that level of visibility for the support coordinator as well, because sometimes participants will actually go and purchase things that the support coordinator wasn't aware of. So, and then that can affect all those budgets. But going back to, is this invoice right? Definitely having a conversation about service agreements and being very clear, trying to be clear when you don't know what something is. Just making sure that when you're having a service agreement conversation that you do understand all those elements, and if you don't understand, then ask for clarity. Even ask for an easy read service agreement, because everybody should be providing things in an easy read format if it's required. There are advocates that can look over service agreements with you as well, but when it comes to the actual invoice, the issuing of the invoice, you can set up ways as a participant or as a nominee to protect yourself. So you can either be approving those invoices as they come in. You can be set on like a 24-hour delay, so it gives you a little bit of time to review and then put on hold if you need to. And you could even ask to be copied into those invoices when they send them out, to be copied in the first instance.
We do that at Flex. We send them out to both parties. We have an alert on our system for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. And just, right back in the beginning, just always question, because at the end of the day, the participant or the nominee is the actual consumer. So they've got every right to question every single element of a service agreement and an invoice.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Any other questions, Damo?
No, I'm good. It's been a great chat.
Yeah. It's been a good chat. Sorry, I sort of probably made it go a little all over the
place.
Not
at all. No, it's been great. There's lots of things ahead for the NDIS, but people such as yourselves and ourselves around,
I actually think it was a great way to get our podcast going, just straight into it, and then,
backtrack a bit.
And then, bam, here we are.
Bam, here we are. Cool. Shall we sign out?
Yeah, thank you, Justine. It's been wonderful.
Thank you very much for having me.
Pleasure. Thanks for tuning in.
Bye.
Bye.